Hello and welcome to part 2 of the lander tutorial. Now what I've got here is just a simple lander that I've thrown together with some of the near future parts that have just come out. I've got 7 engines on the bottom, some landing gear, some RCS, a few docking ports stacked about, and it's got 4,000-ish meters per second of delta V. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly go through what you're required, or what you're required to actually sort of rendezvous again and then landing landers back on the planet. Wasn't something I covered too much, and I figured it's part of the same sort of thing as the last video. So here we go, I'm just getting into orbit. I'm just lowering my thrust down now, because I'm getting the atmospheric effects, which means I'm going a bit too fast, so I'm spending too much fuel fighting against the atmosphere. So just bringing them up slightly, so I'm accelerating again. Essentially, you don't want to waste time fighting against the atmosphere, so you want to keep your thrust levels low enough that you never really get any aerial effects until you get very high. Slightly different if you're using space planes, but obviously rockets go up first and then across in general. So I'm just bringing the thrust back up again, and now I'm actually just going to hit it onto the program marker, and I'm going to use, from here on, I'm going to use my thrust to manage what I'm doing. Now, as I've said before in the previous video, the apoapsis time should be around about sort of 40 to 48, somewhere in there. Now I'm starting to get some flame effects, so I'm just backing off the throttle slightly. I'm bringing it all the way down to a third. Obviously there's a lot of flame effects there, but I'm fairly high in the atmosphere now, and my actual time to apoapsis is just under 48 and holding fairly steady. So this is quite a good sort of a good speed to be at this altitude. Still increasing in height. My apoapsis is going a little bit high there, so I'm backing off the throttle a little bit more. Now this is just something in general that the better you get at launching, and I am not particularly good, but the better you get at launching, the better you sort of get with your landers, especially if you have something that drops to the planet and comes back up. So I'm starting to get a little bit of heat warnings there. And there we go, my apoapsis is just shot out up to 90. I'm just going to push it a little bit further up to 100. There we go. Now it's going to come down a little bit, as you can see, because I'm still dealing with the atmospheric effects. And now I'm just going to kill off the surround of the engines and just leave that centre one there. And you can see how much I've actually dropped back down. I've dropped down a couple of meters, a couple of thousand meters, just because I'm fighting against the atmosphere here. Ideally, going a little bit higher could have been slightly more effective. But at the moment my periapsis height is -44, so that's actually quite a round orbit. I usually have a lot more work to do once I get into space, so that won't cost me too much delta V to circularise. Now what I'm just going to do from here is lock onto that lander, similar to before, but the difference this time is I'm going to show off the manoeuvre planner in MechJeb and show how this works. So I'm just time warping up. Once you're out of the atmosphere, you usually don't get too many problems with high time warp for physics simulated time warp, unless you have an actual thruster on or something along those lines. There we go, I am now in space, so just pushing up to the apoapsis, And there we go, got a few seconds left, 30 seconds. So the ship's already on automatic prograde, so just lining up and then a little bit of thrust just to bring the periapsis up so that I'm in the proper orbit. And there we go. That should do. So you have a lot of different options here. Home and transfer to target will essentially drop you from one orbit into another. If I was to create a node there, as you can see here, it's gone for a ridiculous amount of delta V because it's caused a small problem here. And this is something you have to watch out for with MechJib. If you don't select what you need precisely, it doesn't entirely work, and sort of using your own best judgment when using the system is a better idea in general. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to say match planes with target, create a node, so it drops a node over here, and that will actually just bring my orbit, which is the blue line here, onto the target orbit perfectly. So if I execute node, all you can see here is it's just reorientating the ship, and then all it's going to do is at the highest mark out of the ascending node or the descending node, it's going to match planes dead on that mark, and it's got auto warp, so it sorts out all the warping. Just warping around. I know it's pretty dark here. But it's just warping around and then executing the button. I'm not touching the keyboard, it's doing it all itself. I'm just turning the camera around occasionally. So now we're on the same plane as the target ship, as you can see there. Pretty smooth. We've just got a slight difference in actual orbits. The orbit of the ship that I'm controlling comes slightly closer in. So if you were to do a home and transfer, again it's still causing this issue. It's trying to do too much of a transfer and it's launching you straight out of the sphere of influence. So if you say fine tune closest approach to target, again another problem. It's giving you a fine tune, but that'll end up, if you don't get it dead on, you'll shoot into the atmosphere. So what you can do is, for that one, what you can do is, if you take your own, just pick a point, so that's 20 seconds ahead, a little bit further. So if I just add a manoeuvre here, just manually, then all I'm doing is just shifting it around until it gives me a big enough swing that brings me close enough. So that's a nice simple one to do, and all I do is execute next node and it'll take the node that I've created and run that as its execution. So there we go, we can see it's just MechJib's sorting out absolutely everything. I did want to put this in because not many people use MechJib a lot on YouTube. In general, there's this attitude that using MechJib is cheating, and it's actually not. It's the exact opposite. This is how space programs work. There are very few, I think there's less than 5 actually manned, like controlled by humans, space launches that they've had, because everything runs on computers. So this is actually the way they would do it. They would program everything and get it set up in advance. But it also saves a lot of time. So instead of fiddling about, as you've seen in the previous video, fiddling with the orbital markers and trying to get everything right and changing it, this gives you a nice simple way of picking the target, and it will sort out your orbits for you. Now, it won't, as I've just shown, it won't do everything, but it'll do a lot. Just while I'm here, I'm gonna deploy the solar panels, just so I don't run out of charge, but also because these ones are ridiculously pretty. If you're looking for what mod this is, the legs, the solar panels, the engines, and all of the body parts are part of the near future technologies. Near future spacecraft and the new launchers pack. I think it's launchers, I can't remember the name of it. It's all on the same page. But there we go. So what we've got now is, on this screen we have a fairly close intercept. So if I just go here and say fine tune closest approach, it'll give me 200 meters. If I go a little bit closer, hit create node, then in 16 minutes it's got a node here which will give me a 0.1 kilometer 100 meter separation. So if I hit execute next node, then once again it starts rotating us round. Now if you turn on RCS you can get it to do this faster, but I'm being very aware of the delta V I've got. And then that's it, it's got onto target, so it's starting its auto warp. This is something that's very useful for people that are new to it. There's also another patch that you can get that automatically implements MechJeb into every cockpit, which is very useful. If you're playing career mode, it doesn't unlock all of these things straight away. There are certain things that unlock over time, so it still requires a bit of skill in the career. And personally I think it's brilliant because it saves all of the faff and it gets you to more playing the actual game as opposed to sliding in orbit here and there. So now that it's got closest approach, as you can see here, we're separated by 1000 meters. You go to match velocities. So if I create this node, then you can see where it was the closest approach. It's put a node in there, and if you look over here and here, you can see that there's a very close separation. So if I just execute that node, all it's going to do is turn us around, and that node is purely set up so that once I'm 100 meters away from the other craft, it's going to slow us down so that we are doing the exact same velocity. So essentially we are on the exact same orbit. And that's a nice simple method of orbital rendezvous if you don't quite understand what you're doing just yet, or if you do know what you're doing and you just want it to be easier. That's the reason I use it an awful lot, and I think this is a great method for newer people into the game. And when MechJeb does mess up, it is usually hysterically funny. So it's always a good laugh. Most people play Kerbal for the explosions. But here you go, as you can see, we're getting nice and close to the lander. And there, MechJeb's turned on the engine, and it's just slowing us down. And that's us. 0.1 meters per second difference in velocity. So now if I just control from this docking port, now one of the other things you can do is use the auto docking. So we just set this as target, and you see the warning goes away. I'm just overriding distance so that it does this quicker, and it automatically turns on the RCS because you need RCS for docking. Unless you're Scott Manley, obviously he manages to do it without RCS, and I've done a couple of timed burns myself to try and get it in. It is possible, but oh god, it's difficult. Now these two things that I've just ticked, the override start distance and safe distance, are just basically it moving behind the target over here, because where the dock's facing. So it'll move it behind the dock and then up in the line and start across. Takes a bit longer, uses a bit more RCS fuel. Something else to watch is if you get a bit of a sway on this, what can happen is it'll start tilting from one side to the other. And that can cause a bit of an issue because, especially with heavy aircraft, it'll start using up all your RCS very quickly. And it is not ideal. So I am just going to time warp slightly. Now again, time warp affects the way that it does things. Because as you can see here, what I said before about missing calculations. So in the physics engine is actually missing calculations when you're in time warp. Excuse me, high time warp especially. So if I go up one, it's not really missing anything. But here you can see that we're too far forward. So if I just restart that, it'll push itself back to get it ready to dock. Then I'm just bringing in a bit of time warp. Not so much it starts missing things. It's flicking between green and yellow. There we go, it's just again pushing itself up. I think it was Robas that said best, if you want to do a manual dock, be prepared to waste an hour of your life. It does take time, it takes a little bit of preparation, but it's brilliant to do. Now the other thing on this box is the force roll. If I click that and you'll see it rotating the craft, and what it's doing is rotating north on the docking port to north on the receiver port, which is very good if you're building craft. So if you're sending up parts to build a space station, that is brilliant, because even with your best efforts you can still get a little bit of wobble. The RCS system in the game isn't perfect. Now once it gets close, turn it off. Sometimes it connects too close and doesn't quite get it right. So it's always best to turn it off and give it a better shot. Now all I'm going to do is steal a bit of fuel off of this lander. To help with some of the landing that I'm going to do. But here we go, nice and simple, 2 landers docked. So the next thing I'm going to do is, so that now, as you can see here, our landing site, the KSB, is a little bit into the daylight side. We've just walked forward half a day or so. Now the first type of landing I'm just going to show you is a chute landing. So if we just undock here, now the simplest type of landing is of course when you have a heat shield and some engines. So here we have a heat shield here. Now this isn't exactly put together brilliantly, I rushed this one. But what you want to aim for, if you don't have the trajectories mode installed, is your standard orbit. You want to try and get it around about 20 kilometers in height, 20,000 meters, over this continent here. So I'm facing retrograde, so I'm just burning away. I'm going for a little bit less than that, it looks like. There we go, I'm just sorting out. The trajectories mod is something that's also good for helping you work out landings. So from this orbit, for me, it's looking like that is good enough. So just south of this island. Now just inflating the heat shield. Unfortunately we're probably going to lose those two engines on the way in, and as you can see my trajectory has actually moved slightly back, even though the orbit's the same, and that's just because of the fact that I've changed it slightly. I've changed the shape of the vessel, so the trajectories mod is accounting for the fact that we have a heat shield on here. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to push it a little bit forward, if I can, without damaging anything. There we go. And then we're just going to turn around. The engine's off. This is just going to be what they call a ballistic entry. What I'm doing now is I'm just shunting fuel. This isn't something you can do early on, but you want the heaviest part of your craft to be as close to the heat shield as possible to make it more stable. Because I moved some of the fuel out when I transferred it across to the other ship, I'm just trying to readjust for that. So I'm just filling that bottom tank up. There we go, the bottom tank's full, and then from this tank I'm just, oops, wrong way. I'm just moving that fuel from that little tank there back the way down. Now what I'm not doing is moving the fuel out of here, because that fuel is going to be used if I need an emergency lander. So now we're coming in, we're just pulling on the solar panels and warp down to the atmosphere. What you can do is just, if your ship's well balanced, turn off SAS. So if you're heavy enough in the middle, this should keep you fairly straight on re-entry. If you're not fairly well balanced in the middle, then you want to keep SAS on and maybe RCS on to try and balance your ship out as you come through the atmosphere. And obviously at high time warp again, you can see it's skipping instructions there. So one of the things that can cause is it can cause you to overshoot, but it can also cause things to overheat and explode that wouldn't normally. As you can see, I'm getting a lot of heat between these two engines when it sort of tips me forward and back. There you can see we're just going to slightly overshoot. And that's just your standard ballistic entry. Now if you're doing this with a probe, what you would do is you would deploy your chutes in advance, because your chutes are basically, they have a safety mechanism on them that means that those have deployed immediately. Oh, they've both deployed immediately, but they won't deploy from orbit if you've set them up correctly. If you change this deploy mode to when safe, then they'll automatically deploy when they get to the point where it's safe for them to do that. Now, this may cause things to explode. Oh no, we're okay. So I'm just getting rid of that heat shield for the landing because this has got landing gear on it. Doesn't really matter because this is landing in the water, but it can be a help on occasion. And there we go. So this sort of shows this heat shield isn't actually attached at the moment. So it's a good example of showing exactly how much wind resistance you get off of these. You'll see videos on YouTube where people have used these as actually air brakes instead of using them as heat shields. They work very well. There we go. have slowed down enough. Now because I added the extra fuel on this just to make it to orbit when I originally did it, I've added extra fuel and extra engine, so this isn't coming down at an amount that is safe. So in this occasion what you want to do is add in a little bit of rocket power as well, just to slow it for this final landing. And there we go, nice and simple. Right. So, rocket powered landings from orbit. So what you want to do is you just want to turn your ship around so you are facing retrograde. Yep, I forgot the word there and had to look it up. And what I'm just going to do is keep an eye on where I want to land. Now if you're not aiming for a specific place, this doesn't matter too much, but for me I want to land close to the KSC at least. And I use the trajectory mode for a lot of things. Makes it simpler because of different heights and where you come in, so that's a little bit too much. So for me I'm just turning on the RCS and hitting reverse. Which as you can see is just giving me a little reverse boost even though I'm still facing a little bit backwards. So we've got a rough idea of our landed zone, and then all we want to do is make sure that we put all the solar panels away as we enter the atmosphere. We keep retrograde, and then any flame effects we want to negate them by burning. Now if you're running a probe and you don't have somebody on, this might not be an issue. However, if you have re-entry plasma enabled, which basically cuts off all your communications when something's re-entering, you get a blackout window in the middle which can either cut off your communication and mean that you can't start an engine, or it can cut off your communication after you've started the engine and drain all your fuel for landing. So you have to make sure that your vehicle is set up for those contingencies, either having enough power to get around about that problem, so that you can come through the atmosphere a little bit heavier, or you decelerate beforehand. There we go, we're starting to get a thermal warning. We're getting a few more thermal warnings because we're coming in very shallow this time. So those little warnings were on my solar panels on the side. So that's our first burn. Obviously we're still overshooting a bit. And again, another burn, just trying to keep this nice and low. I can see the flashing ones elsewhere, but it's this main fuel tank that I know to be the lightest. We still have plenty of Delta V, so might as well waste it. It's starting to get a little bit high again. So I'm just putting another burn in. I'm starting to dip deeper into the atmosphere, which will cause more re-entry effects. And just keeping an eye on the landed zone. If you don't want to overshoot or something, it's very important you keep an eye on that. Now I still have the option of turning on all of the other engines if my thrust isn't enough, but for the moment I seem to be doing okay. Getting an overheat on one of the engines, so I'm just slowing down a bit more. You also have to keep an eye on your fuel left, so I know that I've got how much Delta V I've got. And our electricity is getting a little bit finite. Oh no, it's not this electricity, it's somebody else's. That's fine. And there we go, we've slowed down without too many ill effects, we've not lost anything. We've stopped it overheating. Now this does have parachutes for emergencies, but for the moment we don't need to use them. Just trying to keep this descending nice and slowly. Just slowing us down. Oops. And there we go, nice and smooth for a change. So there's a few examples of landing from orbit. I hope that helps anybody that's watching. And feel free to ask if you need any help with all different things. MechJib is a good answer, but it's not a complete answer. So if you want to see anything, please leave a comment. If you liked this video, please leave a comment. And if you want to see anything else, and I will see you on the next video.